Almost every country in the world is drowning in debt. The United States debt has now surpassed $38 trillion, the highest number in its history. The European Union's debt has reached $14 trillion, and Japan's has climbed to $9 trillion. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia, export giants like Germany and China, are all trillions of dollars in debt. But here comes a really interesting question. If everyone is in debt, then who actually has the money? That's where the story behind the curtain begins. Because debt isn't just a burden on people. It's actually the very foundation of the modern world itself. Every war, every crisis, every rise and collapse, all of it stands on this invisible swamp of global debt. And if you trace that chain far enough back, you realize something. The world isn't really in debt to anyone else. People are in debt to themselves. But of course, that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Today, humanity owes a total of $315 trillion. That's almost 3 times the size of the entire global economy. So how did we get here? The story actually goes back centuries. Long before credit cards even existed, the idea of national debt was born out of war. In 1694, England was at war with France, but their gold reserves were gone. Even the king himself had to borrow money from wealthy merchants. In return, he promised them something: you'll be repaid in the future from tax revenues, with interest. To manage this system, the Bank of England was founded. That event became a true turning point in history. For the first time, a government could spend money it didn't yet have. Lenders trusted the king's word. And that promise became something new. That promise, the government bond, was the birth of the modern financial world. Soon France copied the system, the Dutch improved it, and the United States used it to finance its revolution and growth. Debt stopped being something shameful. It became a symbol of trust. If you could borrow money, it meant you were powerful. Centuries passed and the system grew. Today, debt has become the world's biggest export. The US now owes $38 trillion. Japan, $9 trillion. And every 100 days, the world takes on another $1 trillion of debt. Every country owes money, every bank lends it, and every citizen has become both a debtor and a creditor. But the question still remains, who really owes whom? Let's take the US as an example. Half of that $38 trillion is owed to investors, and most of those investors are actually Americans themselves. Banks, pension funds, investment firms, insurance companies, even the Federal Reserve. The rest is held by foreign countries, mostly Japan, then China, the UK, and a few in Europe. So when people say the US owes China, they're actually talking about just 2% of the total debt. In reality, America owes itself. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve buys those bonds back and creates new dollars in exchange. Citizens pay taxes, those taxes pay interest, and that interest ends up right back in Americans' retirement accounts. Think of it as a loop. Everyone inside the system is both a borrower and a lender. And this loop isn't unique to America. It's global. Japan lends to the US lends to Europe through the IMF, Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank, and those countries invest their reserves back into developed nations' bonds. Everyone owns a piece of someone else's promise. A global chain of trust, each promise backed by another promise. It's like a poker table where everyone borrows chips from the next player. And the game only continues as long as nobody stands up. But behind this game lies another kind of power, the markets. Behind those government bonds are funds, hedge funds and central banks controlling trillions of dollars. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay high interest. Lose their confidence and your currency crashes. Even your government could fall. Democracy decides who governs, but the markets decide who survives. And at the heart of it all sits the central bank. Because a central bank doesn't just manage debt, it creates it. When it buys government bonds, it literally brings money out of thin air. One person's debt becomes another person's asset. Every dollar is actually a unit of debt. There's no such thing as money without debt. Behind every dollar, there's an invisible IOU. For years, this system ran smoothly. Investors trusted that governments would pay their interest, and so the system kept its balance. But when that trust breaks, what happens? We've seen it. In Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka. When debt can't be repaid, interest rates skyrocket, economies collapse, people riot, bailouts arrive. But the price is heavy: unemployment, poverty, despair. And then somehow, the cycle restarts. New debts replace old ones. Because this system isn't designed to end debt. It's DDs. Today, no government actually plans to pay off its debt completely. It's not a secret. It's policy. They constantly renew it, like a subscription. They issue new bonds to pay off old ones. Economists call this refinancing. The real product now is interest, the price of stability, and the entire global economy runs on that interest. The US will never fully repay its debt. Japan has lived for decades with a 250% debt ratio. But investors aren't afraid, because government debt is seen as the world's safest collateral. A US Treasury bond is basically money. It's collateral for banks, investment for funds, reserves for central banks. In other words, the system is built so that governments never fully pay off their debt. Think about it. If the US suddenly said, "We're paying off everything," banks and funds worldwide would lose their safest asset. The money supply would shrink and the economy would crash. So paying off the debt would actually destroy the system itself. That's why governments always issue new debt. It's a rhythm, the heartbeat of capitalism. Every pension, every mortgage, every investment moves to that beat. When politicians say, "We'll balance the budget, we'll end the debt," they're just selling an illusion. The goal isn't to erase debt, it's to keep it manageable, to keep the faith alive, to keep the machine running. Because the moment people lose faith, the whole system stops. That's the real secret of debt. The plan was never to pay it off, but to make the world believe that it will be paid. It's a giant cycle of trust. As long as people believe, the numbers can grow forever. But that trust isn't distributed equally. Interest payments usually flow upward, from workers and taxpayers to investors, funds, and banks. So debt isn't just a transfer between countries. It's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global debt rise together. In this system, those who hold debt profit. Those who pay it lose. But that doesn't mean one is evil and the other a victim. They're both parts of the same machine. The real question is, what happens if that machine breaks? If new debt can no longer cover old promises? Then the question, who do we owe, stops being abstract and becomes personal. Because the creditor at the top isn't one person, not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them. And us. Modern finance turned debt into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and we all live by it. Once debt meant dependence. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever collapses, we'll remember the truth. Debt is a promise that can't be kept forever. If this gave you a new perspective, make sure to subscribe. History has already written the answers. I'm just here to show you where to look.